Thanks for joining us for another episode of Talks with T. Today, I have a super special guest, Ramy Assaf, who's the founder and CEO of Zbooni. Over the course of his career, he's done everything from working in a more corporate environment to VC to a couple of not so successful startup, eventually leading him to a very successful startup at Zbooni. Ramy is also not just a fellow entrepreneur, he's a childhood friend. We were just talking that I've probably known you since I was born. I think you're older, a year older.
I just look older. I think we're the same.
Yeah, definitely you're older. And so we've been childhood friends now. I think my mom and your dad are...
I think you might be my cousin.
Okay, all right. Like... in the way Arabs talk about cousins, where everyone's their cousin.
I think there was like some relationship in the village where our grandparents grew up.
Yeah. Some like Syrian blood running deep.
Exactly, yeah.
And so we grew up together in Orange County.
That's right.
Yeah. Far away from Damascus.
Pretty far from, about as far as you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And then somehow we both ended up in Dubai.
Well, you were a pioneer of that.
Fair. Yeah, my family's been here since 92. So when we left the US, we moved to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, you were like the early adopter of moving to UAE.
What is your recollection of the first startup or company you began?
So it's all quite serendipitous. You know, after I did graduate, I started working on some different projects. Like I would just always have this social network of people, because I was attracted to those types of people who were kind of self-made. And so in that network, I would meet people and they'd have projects and I'd get involved and kind of get my hand in certain things. So I tried something related to tagging like elderly dementia patients with RFID tags.
Okay.
Because they often escape their,
sounds like only a U.S. problem.
It's a pretty niche problem.
Yeah.
But it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Like you have these people who are 80, 90 years old and they can escape through a back door of a facility and you can't find them for 3-4 days.
Yeah. And they don't know where they are.
And they don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And so why not RFID tag them, and if they leave through a certain place, it sends an alarm. It's like, it's not that novel of an idea. They probably do it now. It's probably like normalized now, but that was probably the first project I tried doing. And then it didn't really work as I had anticipated. So I was like, I think I need to get a real job for a little bit. So I went into Craigslist and I started looking, and I found this company that had an interesting offer. And it was like paying high commissions, equipment leasing, and that was in Long Beach, California. So I called the job poster, and when I called, I spoke to someone, and then I realized, like, wait a minute, I think I know the owner of this company. And so when I showed up, they were like, oh yeah, you're awesome. Of course you can have the job. So I just took a desk. It wasn't like a very arduous interview process. It was just like a high commission sales job.
Yeah.
And probably on day 3, the owner, who was pretty young, he's like, hey, come by my office, let's have a chat. So we're chatting, and he's like, oh, you have entrepreneurial, aspirations? Yeah, I do. He's like, okay, listen, I have another project I'm working on.
The side hustle.
The side hustle. You might be better suited for that because I need some help.
Yeah.
Which was a startup, which was an actual tech startup. And I got involved with that. And he's like, listen, I can grant you equity and do whatever, and let's give it a go. And so I sat there, and we went through the motions of doing the startup and signing up customers. And what that business was a classified for businesses for sale.
Okay.
Okay, it's like a marketplace of businesses for sale.
This is in like the early 2000s?
This is in 2005, 2006.
Okay. So before marketplaces.
Yeah, it was
probably eBay was like the only marketplace
Right.
alive.
So it was pretty novel. I mean, there was classifieds. There was
Yeah.
something called BizBen and BizBuySell and all these things. Like it's for these business brokers. And again, back to the immigrant families, when they show up, they need to find out which gas stations are for sale.
Yeah.
So they need to go to a website to find them. So
Pretty advanced immigrants to know
to use the internet.
to use the internet. Yeah.
So that didn't work. But what did work was I got pretty deeply involved in like understanding digital marketing and understanding SEM and SEO and landing pages and affiliate marketing. And all of that skill set started becoming interesting to me. And I started to hone that. Then in 2009, we had set up then an agency doing affiliate marketing. And we got pretty good with that.
Okay.
But no matter how good you are at that, there's like 1,000 people better than you at doing that. So, for example, Dish, like the satellite company, they would be running an offer. And if you sign up, you could get to provide a lead for someone who wants Dish satellite service at home. Just to provide that lead, they'd pay, $80 or something.
Yeah.
So if I go build a landing page and attract end customers who want it and just show interest in that, you would sell that as a lead. So every time we'd like finish designing our landing page and publishing it, there would be like 80 other landing pages already published.
Yeah. Barrier to entry super low.
And so we were good at what we were doing, but it was just too much, too competitive. Then by chance, the whole thing like the roommates, brothers, cousins or whatever, like I met the founder and CEO of Zawiya.
Okay.
And he was like, he had come to California for a conference. And he's like, hey, what do you guys do? And we're like, oh, we work in this and digital. He's like, oh, in his mind, he's like, oh, that's great because we need people like that back in Dubai, back at HQ. Would you be interested if, we had an opportunity? And I was like, yeah, why not?
So you're part of the Zawiya Mafia.
I became part of the Zawiya Mafia.
What employee were you?
Oh, I was pretty late. Like they started 2001.
Okay.
So it was, I think 2001. And I didn't know what the company was, but I joined 2009.
Okay.
And then the company exited to Thomson Reuters 2011. And that was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I can be part of one of these journeys of success.
Yeah.
Can we do that again? Or was that a coincidence? And then you kind of question yourself like, was this a fluke or did I actually did I cause something? Did I make the decisions?
What was your role there?
My role was marketplace develop. They like created a role.
Okay.
Basically the website was getting like 1 million visitors a month. Yeah. And it would monetize through subscribers paying, I forgot what like $2,000 a month for the financial services access to information about financial services. So their customers were like investment banks and private equity firms and stuff like that. But they were getting, 999,000 of their visitors per month were being unmonetized.
Yeah.
So my role was to figure out how we're going to serve that audience something of value that we can monetize.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
And what did you learn? I mean, you were at the tail end of this story. What did you learn from your time there?
I learned, I guess, maybe in hindsight, what I learned was there's a few people who have very powerful opinions in these organizations. And as you scale and grow, you need different skill sets to join the organization that are allowing more, operationally sound ways of running a business. And you can't you can't be ultra creative and visionary and be running a tight ship all in one. So those are different people. And based on what a company needs to get done, you kind of have to favor one or the other. So that company was at the end of its creativity cycle, and in the how do we cement this business and drive revenue and profit margin. which wasn't the most exciting place, but it was obviously a cool experience to see that transformation. It's like the necessary evil of
growing up.
Yeah.
And what is that experience like for you, going through an exit?
I mean, I wasn't too involved in that.
Yeah.
It was kind of just like,
It just happened.
it just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like I was consulted on it or something. It was
No one
just,
asked your
no one
opinion.
asked my opinion.
Hey, Ramy, what do you think about us selling to you?
Yeah.
Good old Thomson Reuters
So I found out like after it was like in the news, basically.
on Zawiya's website.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, what happens now, basically?
Yeah. So what did you do?
So the team that founded Zawiya, one of them who became my mentor, and he remains my mentor. So he was like, look, we're gonna do this again. We're gonna set up a lab and do some more startups, and we'll raise a little bit of capital. And it was one of the first venture builders or startup labs the Middle East had ever seen.
It may have been the first, actually.
It probably was. Yeah. And it's an open canvas, and we didn't really have a formula. It was kind of like, okay, what do we think is a good idea and worth pursuing? And someone's going to take the lead on that and get it on its feet, and then we'll do that again and again and again. I mean, I guess that part of it is typical, but for us, we didn't have a blueprint to follow. It was just what we thought made sense. So I played a role in there as kind of like helping with marketing, helping with some strategy. I became closer to the decision-making side of things. And I earned some trust there. So ultimately, like, we had reached a place where one of the projects wasn't working as we had hoped. Like, the value prop wasn't powerful enough to like get the impact that we thought it would. So we needed to shift strategy. So, I presented a transformation to how it was going to be run. And they're like, you know what, that's actually a good idea. And they took that, suggestion and ran with it. And we ran with it. And from that started to build my confidence. Like, okay, you know what, I can make good judgment calls from time to time. And again, that just gave you more of the like taste. Like you could do this. Like, you can run a show.
Yeah.
So then finally, 2013, I came up with this concept. It was an idea called Friendshipper. We called it Friendshipper. And it was an awesome idea.
It was actually a pretty good idea, I'm not going to lie.
Freaking genius.
Yeah.
And the media loved it. It was basically, if you're traveling, you always have those people on Facebook that are like, hey, is anyone coming from Cairo? Is anyone going to Amman? I need so-and-so.
I need to send a package that you can't open and ask any questions about, and just trust that.
So we made an app out of it. And the media loved it, and we were covered by The Economist magazine, and it was going to change the world, and very disruptive and super exciting stuff. And we had lots of downloads and all that stuff, but what we didn't have was a business model. And it,
somewhat important.
Yeah, so there was like, we'll figure it out later sort of thing. And we're like, okay.
Did you guys get traction?
We got traction in the sense of lots of demand. So there was always demand for people like requesting stuff that they wanted delivered. But the supply.
The people who were willing to
there
carry.
was a supply gap.
Yeah.
You didn't have enough mules.
Yeah, fair.
So we're like, I don't think this is going to work.
How long did you do that for?
That was about 1.5 years.
Okay.
And we raised just a little bit of, it wasn't like a capital intensive project. It was enough to pay a couple people some small salaries and try this out. And we had people who believed in us and were willing to back that. And then when I saw that it wasn't working, I was like, look, what am I going to do? Just dry the well and use all the like, why don't I just stop this again and I'll work again like in a regular gig. And MEVP had just launched its Dubai office. And they're like, look, we need a person to interface with the with all the companies that want to come pitch and do some sort of filtering. And we trust you, kind of. You seem to know what you're doing. We'll give you a shot. And I was like, okay, cool. These guys are going to pay me to basically stay working in this
space that you've come to love at this point.
And then everything kind of became like a waterfall. Like every day you're meeting new entrepreneurs, new ideas. You're going through like 600-700 pitches a year.
Yeah.
And I'm now on the other side of the table. Like I was that guy who was like pitching the idea and trying to do this and trying to convince the investor that this is a good idea. And now I'm acting as like, it was a bit like I felt like a fraud, like a phony.
Yeah.
But it was a good learning experience.
Why'd you feel like a phony?
Because I didn't feel like I was in a position to judge.
It's like imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it was like
yeah.
I really empathized with the entrepreneurs coming in. And if I saw a gap, like over time, I'd be like, oh, you know what? This entrepreneur is really good. Like they've really thought about the business model. Oh, these guys are really good with product. Oh, these guys are really good with this. But you would always also see the gaps.
Mm.
And after a year or so of doing that, you kind of like hone your skills and you're like, oh, I think I get it now.
Mm.
You know, I think I understand more to this. I saw it more holistically. It wasn't just about having a good idea.
Mm.
It was really about thinking through seeing around the corners, understanding all the things you need to run a successful startup, the team, the timing, the funding, the business model, all of that.
Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like for a startup to succeed, almost everything needs to align perfectly. Like, even if I think about the team, you can't have really strong. Well, you get to a scale, post, let's call it series A or B, where you can't just have like a really good product team and have a shit HR team.
Yeah.
Or have a really good marketing team and a really shit sales team. Like every single function has to be at least a B plus.
In the early days, if your sales team is very good, you look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Which is what happened with Bezat. I mean, our product engineering team, it was a sales-led organization for the first 2-3 years, and we started to plateau, right? Because we kind of had product market fit, but in reality, maybe not, because we just had a really good sales engine. And that's why I'm saying I think you get to a certain stage where you can't hide any more weaknesses in the business.
Right.
In the early days, you can get by.
Yeah, and it's big of you to acknowledge that, because that's usually the key to impressing. And like investors really don't know if your tech is good or not, or if your product is good, but they can read numbers.
Yeah.
And if your growth looks good, then it must be good.
Yeah.
Right. And you can kind of get away with temporary simulation of everything being fine because your sales are in good shape. But that's just going to come back and haunt you if your product can't do the heavy lifting later or do what it represents what it's supposed to. So for the fact you guys acknowledge that and then in the background actually
scrambled to fix
that and did it in a timely fashion, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of investors confuse go-to-market fit and product market fit. And going back to my earlier point, both have to be on point, really. And then there's those two engines, and there's the internal talent engine, and those three engines just need to be firing on all cylinders. And it sounds like that's kind of what you saw or picked up from your time at MEVP.
Yeah, and also what I picked up was there's not many good opportunities for an investor, like at that time.
Yeah.
And it's probably changed. I mean, it's obviously changed now.
Yeah.
But
this is what, like 2012?
2012.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of...
2012, 2013.
Yeah.
So it was still very thin. Like that time was still, you didn't have the X DIFC crowd. You didn't have the ex-engineers and
It wasn't
management.
sexy yet to be in a startup.
Right, and it was still like, oh my God, that's so cute that you're doing a startup.
Yeah.
It wasn't taken seriously yet. So the talent pool was quite dry.
Yeah.
And so you had these kind of like unemployable people
Yeah.
who wanted to set up a business, and they thought the business, all I need is capital and I'll figure it out. We're like, no,
I mean, you still have that today.
yeah, I guess that hasn't changed. But so I was like, okay, this isn't the most dense arena for me as an investor now.
Mm.
Like, and you'd always see these gaps, like, oh, if these guys just did that, it would be so, like, you'd be thinking that in your head.
Mm.
Oh, why did they take that decision? If they did it this way, it would, and then eventually.
But how did you have the conviction or the ability to make those calls when you hadn't necessarily
done it myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, it's just instinct.
Okay. So you just started developing an instinct from the different conversations, and
goes back to the false confidence thing,
Yeah.
right? Like I have enough.
so fake it till you make it type of thing.
Yeah,
or-
but this was now, it's even worse because it's internalized. Like
okay.
I'm just faking it to myself that I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
right? So, oh, I think this would work better, or that, or oh, if only they considered whatever. And I was like, why am I doing this? If I think I'm so smart and capable, I should put my money where my mouth is, and I should do a startup again, right? And it felt more comfortable to be on the other side. So then I left that, took my pseudo new degree with me,
Yeah.
and gave it one more go.
I guess when you look back, before we talk about going on to found Zbooni, when you look back at your time at MEVP, what were some of the biggest, what were the common misconceptions entrepreneurs had? What were the common flaws, gaps you saw during your time there?
A couple things. One, it was either mistimed, like you're asking for money at the wrong time. Like you need to either prove something first. You need to have give us something, some evidence.
Something besides a PowerPoint
Yeah,
presentation.
like, can you go beyond? But I think the thing that bothered me the most was always like, back to the, I need the cap. If I get the capital, then I can do ABC. Well, if you're a real entrepreneur, you're going to hustle your way through getting to something. You're going to make something out of nothing first, and then we can put you on, rocket boosters. But it's always like, the woe is me, and I have this great idea. If you could just give me capital, then I could hire the team, then I could attract the talent, and you have nothing. And people latch onto their ideas too tightly, and they think the idea is what's valuable, whereas what's valuable is your ability to execute, even on a small micro scale, demonstrate some level of that. And that was always the main problem I saw, or I felt.
No, I think it's a really, really good point. I think a true entrepreneur is always going to be resilient and just, like you said, find a way to make something out of nothing. And there's this like misconception that all the stars need to align
Before I can start.
Or even in the business, right? Like, sometimes we'd hire people who've kind of come from a corporate environment. They'll come in and be like, well, this is broken and this is broken and this is broken. And I'm like, yeah, correct.
That's right.
Yeah. But only one of those things really matters. Everything else is just a little skin rash that's not going to grow. And so just fucking deal with it and let's build. And so you're right. I think it's a really good point. And so now you're like, okay, I'm not really an investor. I'm more of an entrepreneur.
One of my colleagues, a guy who I really cherish at MEVP, who was also an implant like me. Like he was more of an entrepreneur turned temporary investor. It was me and him in the office often, and like, oh, we got to do something, man. You know, it was like we got to get out of here. And we would kind of provoke each other. We give it one more month, and we'll be out of here.
Were you guys like coming up with random ideas?
We were coming up with the worst ideas.
Okay.
And then I guess there was like a bit of a spark, and that happened when my wife told me she was going to start a business, quote unquote. And I'm wondering, what is she talking about? Because she wasn't the most entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But, so I was kind of intrigued and excited, like, what are you going to do? She's like, well, my friend Heda in Lebanon started this business selling hats. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, she sells these hats. They're beach hats. And they have a custom embroidered, message you can add to the hat to customize it. I'm like, okay, what are you talking? Like, this was like a Twilight Zone. Like, are you serious? She's like, yeah, I'm going to partner with her, and I'm going to be like kind of like her agent in Dubai.
Her Dubai office.
I'm going to be the Dubai branch.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool. And I want to be supportive, and I want to not. And I was in the investor mode, so I'm like, are you
Show
sure?
me your cash flow model.
Yeah, I was like,
what's your IRR?
Exactly. And I was asking like all these hard hitting questions. And she's like, dude, just relax, okay?
Just be my husband.
Yeah, I'm just going to put them on Instagram. And if people want to buy them, they message us.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you need let me be helpful somehow. Do you need an e-commerce website with that? And she's like, I don't think so. It sounds too complicated right now. Why don't we just use the social media? We'll use Instagram. So I'm watching now like this manifest in front of me.
No.
And she starts selling these hats. And if you dig a little bit closer, her WhatsApp is just filled with these like random
sales inquiries.
Yeah. And it's funny because she would try and be organized about it. So she would be like, hat client number 1, hat client number 2.
So she turned her WhatsApp into like a CRM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then she'd have to remember who ordered what hat and what did she have in stock, and then coordinate with Heda when they're going to get shipped from Lebanon, and then how they're going to get to the end customer. And it was just like this aha moment in my head. I was like, oh my God, this world of messaging is converging with the world of commerce.
Mm.
That's interesting. And WhatsApp has, propagated to the point where it's being used as a B2C. Mind you, this is 2016.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so fascinating. Like, this WhatsApp has caused a ripple effect. And one of the things it's created on its, outward impact is like commerce.
Mm.
No one was talking about it. It was like this, just me and my colleagues started talking about this. I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting if there was like a CRM for WhatsApp? He's like, yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. So the two of us, I called another friend of mine who was in California. He was working at Facebook, like product manager at Facebook. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? Do you realize that there's people going on Instagram selling stuff and then using WhatsApp, and there's like this pseudo integration, between these two things. There's a relationship here. What are you guys doing about that? He's like, what are you talking about?
Because it feels like a huge emerging market type of use case, because I think till now a lot of people don't even use WhatsApp in the US. They use iMessage, but WhatsApp like blew up here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, it was obvious.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is going to be big. We got to get into this now.
Yeah, but to be fair, you're saying it's obvious. I don't think it was obvious. And so you seem to have this knack for like saying things ahead of time.
That's what it is, right? Like, you're not going to be right. And that's where timing plays such a, like, it was almost too early.
Okay.
right? And that's probably now looking back, like, I think it was quite early. So the way we went about doing it was talk to my friend from Facebook. He does some digging around, figures out that Facebook isn't, these are all Facebook, properties and new activity and like a new economy being formed out of like their ecosystem. They must know about it. They must be doing something about it. Who's little old me to like do something before they can get their hands on it? So he kind of validated like there was no action taking place on that, and there was like way off the radar.
Yeah.
But that wasn't good enough, and we still thought like, isn't WhatsApp just going to eventually like crush everything, and Facebook is never going to allow such a thing? Like, how far could we get with this before we get squashed?
Yeah.
So we assembled a pitch deck.
Yeah.
And speaking of pitch decks, 99% of them completely suck.
Yeah, you saw quite a few in your...
Yeah. And so
what sucked about pitch decks?
Just way too many data points on one page, and like I don't even know what I'm reading. And the advice I got and that I give now is just have one message to get across per slide.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, that's hard enough to do.
Yeah.
Just try and do one message per slide, and keep it simple, and get your 10 messages across, and you're done.
Yeah. What's a good flow of a pitch deck?
I mean, the conventional wisdom is start with the problem, talk about the solution, talk about the market size, talk about this and that. But the way I built that first pitch deck was I took screenshots of my wife's WhatsApp conversations.
Yeah.
And I literally like took circles and said, these are the pains that people are experiencing.
Yeah.
And then we presented our solution.
Yeah.
So it's like you can see the problem firsthand. So I don't know if I've shared this with anyone or this has never been brought up, but like, when we had that pitch deck, we decided this is probably a big global thing we're looking at, and we're kind of scared of what WhatsApp's going to do. I don't know anyone at WhatsApp because there's like 7 people that work at that company.
And they sold for $1 $1,000,000,000.
Yeah. But they had just exited. I think they had just exited. Anyway, Sequoia was like their main backer. So I sent a cold email to Sequoia. And it was like, hey, this is what we're doing. Are you guys interested in meeting? And they said, yes, we are. Come on down. And
you probably like flipped your shit.
Yeah. We were freaking out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what are we going to do? And so they invited us to like this black site location, which is like in San Francisco, but not on the grid. Like it's never going to be on Google Maps. And it's like you have to enter this brick building that's nondescript, and it looks like an abandoned warehouse on the first floor. And you go through the side door and you go up 2 floors, and then you enter through this. It's literally like a CIA Black Ops site.
You think that's where they get all the Arab and immigrant entrepreneurs to meet?
Yeah, that's where they're going to torture us. So we get there and you walk in and it's like this beautiful place, and it's all like whatever mahogany and stuff. And we present, and they're very courteous and they're very attentive, and they never interrupted once or said anything. Like they were so respectful. Yeah. And it was like, we're halfway through the pitch and it was like, hold on a second. And they'd like bring in a colleague. It was like that. And we're like, is this going well?
Like I have what is this feedback?
Yeah. And they're like, look, we like this. Yeah. We like it a lot, and you're onto something big, and just get back out there and go do it. We could give you capital potentially now, but I'm not sure if you want it because you're so early. Like if we wrote you a check and we didn't think you had enough traction in a year from now, and we didn't follow up, your company would be dead.
Yeah.
It's a kiss of death.
Yeah.
So we advise you to go get as much traction as you can, and then come back when you want a sizable check.
Yeah.
But we're going to be following you along the way.
Yeah.
And in the background, that's what they were doing, right? Like it would be like every 2 months they're checking in on us.
Yeah.
And we're doing this now, we're doing that now. And we had this.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why when I'd walk into investors' offices here in Dubai, who obviously had they'd be like, come on, guys, WhatsApp is going to crush you guys. And it was like, no, actually the people who
invested in WhatsApp,
who know it better than any of us do, they're the ones who are happy to see us doing this.
Yeah. How important was that for you, that meeting, in terms of giving you the conviction that you were, because going back to my earlier point, you have this habit of seeing things early.
It was a moment of like, I need to really listen to myself. And if I really believe something, I gotta have the courage to like act on it and not care what anyone else thinks in terms of ideating, right? I don't need someone's opinion that this is not a good idea or find holes so it just gave us so much more momentum and confidence and removed all those like doubts in the back of your head. And
how do you balance that with when you talk to people, actually incorporating feedback that's valid?
Yeah, so I guess difficulty is exactly what you're asking now. It's like you got to know where your boundaries are in terms of your understanding of things, and instead of always making leaps and trying to, sometimes what the beauty of being a founder or a co-founder is in collecting information, synthesizing it, being objective, and then coming back with it. I always prod when I'm trying to, even if to validate an idea or if I'm not sure about something, I don't not get feedback. I'm always I'm always on WhatsApp with one of our investors, just like what do you think about this?
Suss it out.
And I just want to see how you're going to react. And every once in a while, I get something unexpected.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And how do we incorporate that?
So you're actively looking for
all
input and feedback.
Yeah.
And then you're filtering through what you're going to take and what you're not going to take.
Yeah.
And how do you do that in a way where you're just not like, oh my God, dude, you're such an idiot that you are thinking of these objections for something that's so good?
Well, that's the natural instinct, right?
Yeah.
Most people will immediately tell you why whatever you're thinking is not a good idea.
Yeah. The human mind is programmed for loss aversion versus upside.
Right. And so you kind of ignore that after a while. But then it's still your duty to overcome it. And I need to be able to convince this person that it is it is a good idea. And if you don't have the data to show it, you have to show your enthusiasm. And sometimes they'll just give up and be like, okay, fine, you're right.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of investment takes place as well, right? Like when someone is just so crazy about some approach to doing something, it's like, okay, I don't know, but you seem...
I can tell I'm not going to convince you out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because if you're going to be this gung-ho about it, then I feel more comfortable giving you capital to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, I can imagine from the investor side, it's a weird balance to try to navigate in the context of an entrepreneur has to be somewhat stubborn, because if anyone knew how hard it was going to be, I think very few people would do it.
I think about that all the time. Like, I remember just the act of setting up a company, getting an office, setting up Diwa, like these super basic things, doing them in a quick, speedy process was so challenging. I remember it was like we have to submit the landlord's whatever before 4 o'clock because DIWA's office is going to close. And if it closes, we have to wait till next week. Then we can't do the Ijadi. If we don't do Ijadi, then we can't get internet. If we can't get internet, then we can't, it was like that. And I remember doing like a relay race in Al Quoz. Like I called one of my colleagues who had to meet me with this document. And now I think back, I'm like, where did we get the energy to do all that?
The
like,
patience.
could I do that again?
Yeah.
Would I be able to pick up again and do that? I'm like, I must have been crazy. Like now I can't imagine doing it that all over again. At least at this moment I can't.
Yeah.
Like what was I thinking?
Yeah. So you have Sequoia saying you're on something big, and then you have all these investors in this part of the world saying
you're not onto anything.
Yeah, you're basically just trying to beat what's up.
Yeah. And what I think that was part of it, and the other part of it was like we had never really seen, it was, first of all, you only had like a handful of exits up until just a couple of years ago. We could count them on one hand. So there was like very little empirical evidence to suggest that anything was going to be successful or present like any IRR to the investor. So it was all super speculative. So they really just wanted to make bets on, and it kind of remains that way. They want to make bets on things they've seen work elsewhere, and then we're going to mimic that in the Middle East. You know what I mean? It's like, that would be so much easier because it takes the guesswork out for me. Like company X did it in the US or Europe. Yeah. So if we can just emulate that, there's a blueprint, there's a formula, known economic, there's a comp. That's what's easy to invest in. Yeah. What's not easy is, whoa, you guys are claiming that you have a new technology that's solving a problem that hasn't been solved before. That's way too far-fetched for us, right? Like very few investors would even touch that. Yeah. Unfortunately, because they didn't see the Middle East as a net exporter of technology or innovation. It was always like, we need to import. And we were trying to break that mold a little bit.
So what happens next? You guys start building?
We start building, and...
does your wife end up using your technology stack?
I think she like gave up on her hat business before we even built V1 of the product.
Okay, fair.
So a couple things happened. One is, we had all quit our jobs and started this thing, and we raised enough seed capital. So there was the basically bringing out. I went back to the French shipper investors because we still had some capital. Be like, look, I can give you back 30 cents on the dollar, or
I can roll it in.
I can roll you over here. Yeah. And they're like, just roll us over, dude. Like, we kind of wrote this off anyway. It's not a
we forgot that money was out there.
So just roll us over. I'm like, okay, cool, you're in. So we did that. We built V1 of the product. It was over-engineered. It was kind of like trying to do 20 things. Inventory management and full CRM and tracking and when you press this widget, like this happens, and it was like we overcooked it. Yeah. But we didn't know, we didn't know enough to know what the idea. That's the other side of trying to write your own playbook. Yeah. Which is
you can't copy paste.
You can't copy paste, and so you have to take some guesses here and there. And not all some of those guesses were, well-founded, but some of them were not.
Yeah, and I think it's especially challenging back then because, the seed round, the seed round at that stage is like also the Series A back in that time, right? Like what people get in seed capital now gives them enough runway to try to figure out, is this... I have more runway to figure out if these different things are going to pan out.
Right. Yeah, it was a different environment. Yeah. Changed so rapidly. But luckily, I had two co-founders who I consider, now I cherish them even more than I did at that time, which is, if you're in a startup right now and you have a co-founder who you can depend on and who's fighting with you, you may not value them as much as you should today, but you will later.
100%. I know it wasn't a smooth sailing ride for you guys at the beginning. You know, you mentioned maybe you were a bit early. So I can only imagine there were kind of difficult stretches along the way.
There remains difficult stretches,
Yeah.
right? And that, I don't think that ever goes away. Like you always have this panic or paranoia, like you're going to screw something up and everything's going to fall apart. And there were many times it was close to that. And you have to expect that. Like you never, I don't know. I've never reached a place where I'm like, okay, things are super smooth. I'm going to go on holiday and check in with you. It's always like you wake up and you're like, okay, what fire am I going to put out today? You're just on guard, right? You're expecting some phone call that's going to be bad.
No.
You're expecting this. They're expecting this problem from here or whatever. So that's your new normal. So we suffered a lot in the early days because we didn't have as much traction as we thought. And that's because our product wasn't focused yet enough. Like it wasn't.
You hadn't found product market fit.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But we had enough, let's say, resonance with some customers, and we had enough usage that we're like, there's something here.
Still, you guys were flirting with product market fit.
And then it was in 2018 where we actually properly hit product market fit because we tapered the product so down so it would only hyper focus on solving one problem very well. That's when things really started to work. Yeah. And we're like, oh, okay, look how much we're growing this month and that month and that, it's this is working. And our sales started working and everything started clicking. But it wasn't until March 2020, COVID lockdown, where we saw the super uplift. Like that tailwind for us was huge. And it was like the work we had been preparing for the previous 2 years, operations and admin and all the heavy lifting you do that you don't get credit for. All of a sudden when we have a surge of, we just doubled our customer count in 1 week, we were prepared for that. Like it paid off, like some of the infrastructure we had built. Yeah. And then you get into a different mode. And, some of these bigger companies out there, they suffer from like the answer back to that WhatsApp, why wouldn't WhatsApp do it themselves? Or why doesn't whatever do it themselves? It's because they have more to lose than to gain often. Like, think about Instagram. Like if they change their icon, it sends shockwaves. Like people are like, oh my God, should we keep using it? If they move a button, if they do like any small thing, when you're at the top, you have more to lose than to gain. Yeah,
and just driving that change is super, super difficult. Like it's steering. It's the difference between steering a dinghy boat and
an oil tanker.
Yeah, an oil tanker, right?
So they're not nimble, and then they don't want to take risks. Why should they? Why would WhatsApp, who is the top downloaded app for 5 years running, who's surpassing 1 billion users, why do they need to get into new categories? Why are they in a rush to do anything?
Fair.
Let's just hit maximum velocity, take a breath, and then see where the low-hanging fruit is. So we found ourselves almost in a similar, in a 1,000th smaller scale, hey, this product feature we did works really well. Should we take a chance and do this other stuff? It's but what if we screw up the core thing? So then you start to force yourself into okay, now we do layer 2, do layer 3, and you have to do those. So I would say we had 2 years of just staying afloat, not thriving before getting traction.
Yeah, and what was kind of a difficult moment during that period that kind of comes to mind?
I mean, we've had instances which are like operating a company here is the banking systems here
Yeah.
tend to be very cautious, like more so than anywhere else in the world. I mean, you know that. So I remember once we had a merchant in Lebanon who was doing sales on our platform, and the way it works is like we have to transfer them money from our bank account to theirs. So we get this like notice that we've been blocked by our own bank. And it was like some OFAC investigation on the back of it, which is like terror finance.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh my God. Like we can't even we can't use our bank.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're blocked out, but only of online banking.
Yeah.
Your physical branch is still accessible to you and you can still write checks and do all that, but online banking is you're done.
Yeah.
Like, well, how does that work? How do we pay our entire merchant base?
Yeah.
And what's the problem? Why did you block our account? Oh, well, the person you wired money to seems to have a name match with whatever.
Because there's only like one Muhammad in
Right.
all of the Middle East.
And so it was about, I had to go write letters to Washington, D.C. and OFAC and prove this and provide that and da-da-da. And for 3 or 4 months, we didn't have a bank account
Oh, wow.
in a fully functioning business that has to pay its customers. So do you know what that looked like? That was me and a co-founder writing checks, depositing them in ATM machines on behalf of our customers all around. So it was like, we can now tell you if you want to know where the ATM machines for any given bank are,
You know
just ask me. And we did this without even customers knowing,
Yeah.
right? They didn't feel the impact of it.
And that goes back to what you were talking about in terms of you have to have that hustler's mindset as an entrepreneur. You just have to find a way.
Yeah.
I want a final thought around how important timing is, because you've kind of alluded to friendship or timing. Maybe.
There was no time for that.
Okay. Well, that will remain to be seen.
Yeah.
Zbooni, you talked about timing. So how do you think, what do you mean when you say timing is everything? And then how do you time things in the right way?
I mean, I think it has to do with people's collective, like the collective conscious of people needs to be to know that this is something in need. Like, you're always going to have, whatever product you do, some early adopters.
Yeah.
And then that phase from early adopters to like mass adoption. Is that going to take 6 months or 6 years? Right? So I think you need your pain point to be pronounced enough to a big enough group of people without any solutions or not enough solutions being available to provide it. That's what I mean by timing. So that's a very fragile window, right? Like, if we started a cloud kitchen today, we'd be severely disadvantaged probably.
Yeah.
But what if we had started one, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
It would be perfect.
Yeah.
Like, how the time
Yeah.
So
Can you time things in the right way?
you're probably better off doing something earlier than too late, because too late is harder to recover. Like, you have more incumbents that you're supposed to, now you have to outmaneuver. If you'd rather be too early but super cost conscious, so you don't overspend and you get a chance to. I mean, the bell curve for this is like, either way you can get screwed.
Yeah.
But if your instinct tells you to go for something, just go for it.
Yeah.
Because how many times have you heard that? How many times have you heard someone like, oh, I had that idea.
I had that idea.
Yeah.
Ideas are free.
Right.
Ramy, I heard you say a couple of things that really stuck with me. I think one is kind of wisdom from your dad. If you want to be happy, be your own boss. That definitely resonates with me a lot. you said something around, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to make something out of nothing first before you try to go build and scale your business. I like a lot how you talked about having to listen to yourself and having the courage to execute it despite what others were telling you. And lastly, this whole idea of, it's better to be early than be late. But if you're early, be cost conscious.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun talking to you. It's nice to see a childhood friend have the battle scars to tell such an amazing story. I know there's a lot we didn't cover, but I just want to say, I'm proud of you, dude.
Yeah, likewise, man. I appreciate you having me here. When you started the podcast, I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, is Tarek going to invite me one day? And then you did, and I was like, this is awesome. So I'm proud of you too.
Thanks a lot, amigo.